Gentlemen, it's great to have you here, and thanks to everybody out there for attending day 3 of the Techonomy Virtual. We got a couple more days to go, and it's really been an outstanding program. So we're going to jump right in. We want to maximize the time. And Raj, first of all, I'll say it's great to see you again. Raj was one of our keynotes for a CDX event in 2015, and it's been great to stay in touch with you, Raj, and congratulations on your continued success at FedEx. We're really thrilled for you, and I am as well. Dan, it's great to meet you. You know, you're a busy man doing very important things, and I know you're also helping Orbis on the medical side. But what I want to do is get very quick introductions from both of you, kind of name, rank, serial number, and then we're going to dive right in. So Dan, why don't we start with you?
Sure, Dan Neely. I'm a ophthalmologist, a surgical ophthalmologist. I work at Indiana University, and I also volunteer for Orbis for the past 20 years.
That's great. And can you just share just a tiny bit about your sort of advisory role with Orbis?
All right. So when I was in my training in 1997-98, my mentor, Gene Helveston, is a person who was the first pediatric ophthalmologist for Orbis. And so I became involved through his involvement and have tried to continue the same tradition.
That's great. And Raj, welcome, and we look forward to hearing a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Drew, and it's great to see you again. And I guess the last time we were at Half Moon Bay, I don't know
we
if
were
there again. But
yeah, I hope so. You'll be the first invite, my friend.
Okay, very good. Yeah, no. Again, thank you for having me on your program here. My name is Raj Subramaniam, as you said, and I'm the president and COO of FedEx Corporation.
Great, thank you. So Dan, I know you're not you're more advising with Orbis, but I do want to start just with giving the folks out there just a brief background on Orbis, the company, in case they're not familiar. I think most of us know FedEx.
Right. Yes. So Orbis is an NGO, international NGO based out of New York, who's been around since the early 80s. And the whole purpose of Orbis is to transform lives through improving eye care, helping eye care teams around the world. And they do that by way of several arms. One is a flying eye hospital, the most recent generation of which is very generously donated by FedEx. Yep. And also that have local hospital-based programs where we actually work in the local facilities with the physicians, one-on-one. And then the third arm is what I consult and advise with, which is the technology arm. They have a branch called CyberSight, and CyberSight is the telemedicine, teleeducation branch of Orbis.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So Raj, even though we know about FedEx, you know, FedEx has a long history now. In fact, I was back at BBDO in the late 90s and 2000 when they handled the marketing account. But tell us maybe, you know, a little bit about FedEx that maybe people don't know. You know, the company's evolved, it's acquired some companies, it's moved into different services and products, but share with us a little something that maybe people don't know about FedEx.
Well, firstly, you know, let me say this, that, you know, the pandemic that we're dealing with, the FedEx folks are in the front lines of this pandemic. I think, you know, we have more than 500,000 folks who are, you know, essentially moving a lot of the healthcare related material. I don't think people know that we have moved 1 billion masks in the last few weeks. You know, we probably have had the biggest airlift since the Berlin airlift in 1948 in terms of the amount of equipment that we have moved in the last few weeks, in moving, whether it is test kits, whether it is PPE, whether it is ventilators, or whatever you can think of, vaccine, you know, whether, you know, anything in the healthcare space, we've had a role to play. So that's something you may or may not know, and it's because of the vast networks that we have, whether, you know, 670 airplanes and 180,000 motorized vehicles. But the most important piece of that puzzle is the more than 500,000 of our team members who really are living a mission and, you know, really talking about, this is a sense of who we are and this is a sense of what we do. And I think that's coming through in this pandemic. The one other thing I would add, and we can move on from here, but I think, you know, everyone, you know, may know a lot of that prowess that we have and the fact that we use it, you know, especially when, you know, you have the principle, if your neighbor's house is on fire and you are the one with the hose, we run to the house with the fire, you know, with the fire with the hose. And that's kind of what we're doing with our capabilities right now. But, you know, one of the things that we may not know is the technological underpinning of FedEx. And, you know, I think our chairman and founder, Fred Smith said that the information about the package is as important as the package itself. And I'm sure people on the call are wondering, okay, what's the big deal about that?
Right.
Well, the big deal about that is that he said that in 1978. And that's really spawned the revolution here in terms of the tracking and tracing was born. When the internet came along, we were the very, very first application on the internet. So we have a huge DNA of technology underneath and underpinning. And so I think we are now reimagining the future of FedEx at the intersection of physical and digital. So that's probably something you may not know.
That's great, and it is a great American success story, to be sure. So before I definitely want to dive into the Flying Eye Hospital. I'm fascinated by it. I think it's great. But before I do that, what I really wanted to get from both of you is just a little bit more sort of your feelings around, what's been happening over the last several months and how it's impacted your company and how you work and even how you manage and lead. And Dan, why don't we just start with you? And, obviously with telemedicine and telehealth, that fundamentally has changed how you treat patients and work with patients and institutions and hospitals, but also, in terms of your team. Tell us just a little bit, Dan, start with you about how this has changed how you work and how you manage and lead.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a sea change moment for us. The fields of telemedicine and teleeducation are never going to look the same. People have been forced to adapt to something that was previously maybe a fringe element, and now it's mainstream. But 5 months ago, how many people had done Zoom conferences versus now? I mean, it's just part of life now. And same thing with virtual visits with your physician. That used to be a very subspecialty area. Now everyone's done that. And everyone, it's going forward. There's no going back now. Everyone is going to be doing telemedicine. Everyone is going to be doing teleeducation. And I think we're going to find that the two technology does not replace boots on the ground, but I think we're going to find that it really augments what is possible. And, for us, we were very, very lucky. We've been doing telemedicine for the last 22 years almost. So when this happened and all of a sudden our Flying Eye Hospital is grounded, we can't fly doctors to other countries or nurses to other countries to do work. So those two arms of Orbis were basically shut down. But it took us one day, and we were ramping up our telemedicine to levels that were 10 times what we were doing before. So yeah, it's just been instantaneous.
And Dan, quickly, has sort of this acceleration of digital, innovation and transformation, has it even impacted all the way down to the actual treatments and maybe even remote surgeries and things like that? Have you been doing more of that? And will we see a leapfrog in innovation and technology in things beyond sort of doing a telehealth checkup?
We will. I think, during the last few months when everyone's on lockdown, we saw patient care just come to a grinding stop. So there really wasn't a lot of uptake with remote surgery or even consultations. It was mostly the educational component because people were at home.
Right.
We saw that go through the roof. Now going forward, now is when we take up the steam and we start deploying the remote surgical mentorship, where we can staff a surgery from halfway around the world, and this is just going to give us the fire to do it and the acceptance level to do it, I think.
And then, as with our sessions on 5G today, I mean, I'm assuming that will only accelerate it. And Raj, for you, I mean, you're leading a global organization. You try to drive innovation at scale. You have global teams all over the world. How have you changed, if at all, or how are you trying to drive a culture shift at FedEx, and how are you leading now? How is it different than maybe pre-COVID? And do you have any advice for people in terms of leading global teams during this time?
Well, I think, there's multiple elements to that. So let me get it first, is the fact that the things have changed dramatically over a month, over different regions of the world and different business segments. So everything kind of changed. As to Dan's point here, I mean, if someone had said the word COVID-19 and Zoom back in December, I don't know how many people on this call would have known what that meant.
Right.
And, we started experiencing it early in January when we were actually moving a lot of healthcare material to China, because that's where it started. And then when around the world, we actually then followed around. And then, of course, everything started coming from China to the rest of the world. So that's a big change. And, at the same time, businesses started closing down. And so the B2B shipments went down. I think, it hit bottom somewhere in the mid-April timeframe.
Right.
And very same time, the consumers sitting at home, and working from home started ordering a lot of e-commerce. And so that shipments went through the roof.
Right.
So it's like, the dynamics were, quite rapid through geography and business segment. And we had to move really, really quick to adapt and thrive in this environment.
And are you, sorry, please go ahead.
I was going to say, at the same time, we had to move about 100,000 people to move to work from home. So we had to provide the technology and everything else around the world. So that all this happened in a period of very, very short time. And I think I'm just extremely proud of the team. So the two questions that you asked, one regarding culture, one regarding strategy. As far as strategy is concerned, the incredible thing about it for us was the strategy we had in place. We didn't have to change one thing. In fact, if anything, the macro accelerated towards our strategies, as if we were skating to where the puck was going to be. The puck came to us.
Right.
Because we were all in on e-commerce. We were moving into this direction. We have a differentiated play that no one else has got. We had launched a 7-day service. We got into large packages. We got into inside house delivery of even larger packages. Right. So on. We had so many things underway. Technology plays on, with our mobile app and delivery management. All of those, we needed to scale all, what we expected to happen over a period of 3 years happened in a period of 3 weeks, and it's not going back. So that actually validated our strategy rather than change our strategy. So that was very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Drew.
No, you're answering the questions. I loaded you up with 3, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, the other part of it is culture. And so let me, I think it's a very important piece of the equation. To me, that's paramount.
Yes.
I think, we are our foundation of a very strong culture that has helped us significantly in this regard, especially when the things are changing so fast. At that point, you are then going back to your core and asking you deep questions about you and your organization.
Right.
And that's where we stood up. And I'm really, really proud of our culture that actually, stands the test of this kind of dynamism and innovation. And so that's, in terms of, that's something that you can't build overnight. That's something that's been in the works for more than 40 years. And I think we're standing on a very strong foundation, and that helped us very much in this time frame.
That's great. And that definitely speaks right to our title of the session, The Power of an Innovative Culture in Uncertain Times. And Dan, I'd like to follow up on Raj's comments. And I imagine you probably go around the world and you may deal with hospitals or institutions, maybe even second or third world countries, but they're very innovative. Do you have any sort of maybe advice for the health system in the United States and hospital systems, the insurance companies? Certainly there are lots of hospital systems, insurance companies that are trying to be innovative, but I'm sure you run into a lot of red tape and see a lot of red tape. Do you have any advice for how hospital systems, insurance companies, and the broader sort of U.S. health system can be more innovative, not sort of in terms of, nice slogans and things, but actually really down in the weeds and transforming culture at a hospital or at an insurance company? And any lessons from around the world that maybe you've learned that can help them?
Yeah, well, transforming our healthcare system, that's a big, a big broad topic. What I can tell you is that one of the benefits of traveling to third world countries, developing countries, and working in operating rooms that have open windows and things get reused and there's no running water, you really come to appreciate, one, how great our healthcare system is, but also how much overkill is built into it.
Right.
And it's great, but the benefits of doing more and more and more and having more rules and more regulations, it becomes really incremental gain when you get past a certain point. It's like family friend that was a family physician when I was growing up, and he said he could treat 90% of patients with Vaseline, a Band-Aid, and that's an aspirin. And it's like all you needed. And there's a lot of truth to that.
Right.
I think simplifying things and for us to look at something and really validate whether the cost of it is appropriate for the incremental improvement in care. I think that's the take-home lesson for me.
Yeah. I want to get to the flying hospital. I definitely want to talk about that. But Raj, just sort of on the fly here, I'm thinking about, FedEx is so known for innovation. Going back to the tracking number, it's in its history, it's in its DNA. You're continuing with whether it's drones or robots, and you're moving forward. What's your advice to folks out there that they're committed to innovation, but now times are lean, resources are fewer, and maybe I have to prioritize in regards to my innovation investments? What are the metrics you're using to prioritize your innovation investments at FedEx? Because I'm sure there's so many things that you and your teams would love to do. And I'm sure you were doing many of them before COVID. And I know you still have a commitment from an investment point to innovation, but if you're sitting there having to prioritize and say, you know what, maybe this thing needs to work, what metrics do you use to decide when and where you innovate, particularly if you have fewer resources?
Well, I think because of the very fact that the trends are accelerating, and some of the things that we thought was going to take time is happening faster.
Right.
We have to double down here. At the same token, doubling down on fewer things.
Yep.
So we have now a mantra around enterprise first view and ruthless prioritization, and it is there's no other way around it. And that's where the judgment comes. That's where you get paid. Really, it's a judgment. So you have to make the calls, and it's as important to make the yes calls as to make the no calls. And that call, whatever those calls are, up to you, really, because at senior levels in the company, you can make those decisions, and then hopefully time will prove you right. But if you don't make the calls, then you are mile wide and inch thick. You get nowhere.
Right.
So this is the time to really ruthlessly prioritize, but really double down. And for us, it's clear. I mean, we are autonomous vehicles. Especially we think there's a great opportunity in the same day on demand space, and we are going to double down on that and move forward in that regard. We are very clear that data plays a huge role, and that when we talk about reimagining FedEx at the intersection, it's we are sitting on the world supply chain data. I mean we have roughly 20 million packages a day now, and each of them having 25 scans per package. And in fact, during the pandemic, I got calls from the State Department asking which country is coming out of recession faster and by a week, and so on and so forth.
Right. Yeah.
So
you guys are a leading economic indicator.
Yeah, we are, and so how do we kind of use that information and data really to create value-added services for our customers? So we got to prioritize that, and then of course 3, as we go into significant business to consumer delivery. We have to really use technology to optimize the traffic flows, because that's the only way we get it done. Because delivering one package to a residence is not the most efficient thing, and so we have to get it done in a very creative and using technology as well. So we know. I mean, we have been in this exercise for the last 3-4 months. I mean, forever, but literally last 3 is ruthlessly prioritize, figure the main things, and double down on those. That's the. I mean, there's no magic to it, but you have to have that discipline.
Right. And you had mentioned data, and I'd love to do just a session on data with you guys. You guys manage so much data. It's quite remarkable. So Dan, we're going to go to a question here in just a minute with Jim McCann, who is essentially, we are all part of Jim McCann's family here at Techonomy Media and Clarum, his holding company. But first, Dan, let's dive into the Flying Eye Hospital a little bit. This is such a great story, and Raj, please jump in with your point of view on this. You guys have donated the plane, but Dan, tell us a little bit about the Flying Eye Hospital, and is it back flying, or is it still grounded, or?
It's still resting its heels a little bit.
Okay.
But it's just the most amazing thing in the world, and anyone who steps aboard that is instantly in love with that concept. 30 years ago, so the Flying Eye Hospital still has seats in the front, like a classroom, and a big monitor screen. In about the middle section of the plane, there is a simulation lab where you can do hands-on simulator training in various ophthalmic surgeries. And then just about over the wing zone, you have a surgical theater, which is completely audiovisual wired up. So 20 some cameras, surgeon has a microphone. It is a live surgical event akin to the old school days of the auditorium and the natural light coming through the windows, but on a technology scale. And then in the back of the plane is a recovery room. And this is our 3rd generation one. I mentioned that this plane, this airframe was donated by FedEx. So it's an MD-10 freighter. that was then retrofitted to be a hospital. And even the way this was done has never been done before. It's actually built in units or sections that could go in through the cargo door on the side and then all slide back together, and then about 8 billion miles of wire and tubing connected all together and turned it into a hospital. So it's just incredible technology. Back in the day, 30 years ago, it was just whoever was on the plane could see the surgeries. Now, this airplane is a mobile surgical broadcast studio in addition to the simulators.
Wow.
So that while the surgeries are going on, we have the audience on the plane, but then it also gets sent out via webinar type display like this. And so surgeons can join from all over the world. So we may be in one country, but we may have viewers from 130 countries all participating in that procedure and able to live time talk to the surgeon, ask a question. He's narrating or she's narrating the surgery while they do it. So it's, and the camera, the microscope on the plane also is 3D. So the audience can have 3D goggles on, or if you have VR goggles at home, you can watch these procedures in 3D, which for ophthalmology, when you're talking about depths that are like this being critical, that depth perception is just really important. So this is like unlike anything in the world. And I put it almost second behind the space shuttle in terms of being fascinating.
Would love to get a tour of it someday.
Yeah,
It sounds incredible. Raj, tell us about FedEx's involvement in
Yeah, no, I was going to say, this is, you know, we are very, very proud of our relationship with Orbis, and it's just fascinating to hear, you know, just talk about it. It's just, you know, Dan, just, you know, that was a real, you know, if you get in one of those airplanes, it's just really amazing. And, you know, we began our relationship nearly 40 years ago, and Orbis's founder, Al Yulchi, I mean, he had a personal relationship with Fred. And, you know, I think as a story in early years, you know, when one of the engines of the Orbis Flying Eye Hospital went out of commission, and Al called Fred to ask him if we had an engine that Orbis could borrow, and Fred said, yeah, you know, and he called back and said, yeah, we had an engine available, we could sell it to him. And Al said, how much? Fred said, $1. And, you know, I think they, you know, I think together we launched the Delivering Sight Worldwide Outreach Initiative. And that's, you know, and it's really designed to create public awareness about preventable blindness and Orbis's mission to eradicate it around the world. And we are a global sponsor, and, you know, and because of our unparalleled network and our dedicated employees, our aviation expertise that really assists Orbis in delivering this gift of sight. And we've done it in countless individuals around the world. So that's you know, we not only provide the airplane, but provide annual safety checks, ongoing training, encouraging FedEx pilots to volunteer their time to fly the Flying Eye Hospital. I mean, it's just, you know, and, you know, of course, free shipping services. We are very, very proud of our engagement with Orbis, and most importantly, you know, just to see the outcome of this activity. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's just so heartwarming to see people who just the whole gift of sight, and I'm just so thrilled with this partnership.
That's great. No, it's
you know,
a fascinating story. Yeah, please, Dan.
Well, I just want to reiterate something Raj said, because the FedEx pilots are the volunteers who move that plane around, and it tends to be the same core group of pilots. And so I've met many of them over the years, and these people are just fantastic, and they're really the unsung heroes of Orbis. You know, the doctors go and they get all this attention, but these guys are doing something that's every bit as critical, and I just want to make sure they get a nice shout out, because it's really appreciated what they do.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
We appreciate that. So I'm going to bring in Jim McCann. Many of you know Jim. He's the chairman of Techonomy Media, the founder of 1-800-Flowers, and our good friend, Jim. Great to see you. And I think you have a question here.
Well, first I want to say what an amazing story. The FedEx involvement in Orbis all these years. It's amazing that it's not a better known story. So
I agree.
As good as it is, and Dan, the work that you do, our praise to you and your partners at FedEx for what you do every day. It's amazing too that Raj, that you fly an L-1011, because the fuel for that puppy's got to be a heartbreaker right there.
Yeah, but it's all worth it.
Raj, you know, we've been partners with you at Flowers at FedEx for a long time, and we benefited from that partnership in ways beyond the obvious. when our team goes down to meet with your team and get to brainstorm about the future, and the value add that you bring to a partnership, like I see you do with Orbis, is amazing. And it's what you spoke about before in terms of culture. And we talked for a whole year in our shop about the interactions we have with your team. You give us access to your future planners. But let me turn the tables on you and ask you to think about the future. Not telling us what will, but what might happen. 4 months ago, the world changed. You have to be thinking differently about the future. What might we look at from you and your partners at FedEx in the months and years ahead? How different might FedEx become as a company? We've heard some big things change. Dan talked about how telemedicine and teleeducation, 4 months, what happened in the last 4 months would have taken 4 to 40 years to happen. It all just happened quickly. So we know about that. We used to talk about the wonders of just-in-time inventory. Well, you know what? Our definition has changed a lot now about what's acceptable in terms of inventory levels. How might this change how FedEx looks at the kind of company they are and what they might become?
Well, I'm going to answer that in about 3 or 4 points here. The first one is, what is the future of global trade? And, it's been ever since about 2018, the middle, we have been through a trade war. And ostensibly the war is between US and China, but however, the ricochets have hit around the world. And if you actually track the industrial economy since about mid of 2018, it's been, been down. And, even though the technology sector and the consumer sector and before the pandemic, the industrial sector has been deeply hit. So, if you look at the past 40 years, some of the key reasons for prosperity around the world is because trade as a percentage of GDP continued to increase. And, so it's in a difficult spot right now. And the future of trade is something that we have to really carefully pay attention to, and how, especially the high value trade. And that also then results in this whole notion of diversification of supply chains. So what happens there? I mean, is there a nearshoring going to be something in Mexico or Eastern Europe? Is that going to be something to watch for? Whether it is, China plus 1, 2, 3 strategy, and so just diversification. You talked about just in time. I mean, just in time is a very efficient system. And so, yes, if you walk away from just in time, then that cost is going to show up in some form, either reduced profit margins or increased costs to the consumer. So, there'll be a limit to that conversation. Maybe certain sectors, maybe a little bit more or less just in time. But I think it's, that's, much more. I mean, if we think of our airplanes are flying warehouses, and where, exactly at any point in time where it is, through technology, then I think, there are ways to manage through this period and still be very efficient on inventory. So that's one whole set of things around the global trading system and supply chain, that we got to be really, eyes wide open, especially in the next 2, 3, 4 years, and then from there on.
But Raj, might the role of you as a company change in terms of what acceptable levels of just-in-time inventory are? For example, with PPE, might you become the last in, first out supplier of materials and use your predictive capabilities to determine what level of inventory there should be in different geographies?
So that's where I was going next. I think this is where the power of data comes in significantly. I think we need to be all looking at what a resilient supply chain means. And I think the only way to get there is really through an integration at the data level. And and we then can work strategically, and you just, you're very kind earlier when you talk about working together. That's exactly what I'm talking about, working solutions orientation versus a vendor-supplier relationship to make sure, I mean, we're not negotiating the last nickel on the transportation rate, but making sure that we have a resilient supply chains through data sharing, and we can tell you then, how to optimize your inventory. Exactly answer the questions you said, where it needs to be, how much, and how fast we can get there, what modes of transportation, what is the resilient one, what are the contingencies, and so on and so forth. So the technology, and that was my second thing I was going to talk about, was the role of technology, and in particular data, is going to play a significant role, and as we collaborate strategically with our partners. And then thirdly, a trend that's clear is the rise in e-commerce. Before the pandemic, roughly 15% of US retail was e-commerce. In April, that number jumped to 28%. I don't know where it's going to end, but I don't think it's going back to 15. And so again, very, very much that this market, just in market space for us, 50 million parcels per day in 2016. We expect it to go to 100 million in 2026. We're going to blow through that, much quicker. I mean, so that's the third thing. And the fourth is much more, I think everyone is facing, what does work from home look like and what is the future of office? And so that's something that I think all of us learn to figure out ways through it.
But Raj, your capabilities are the gating agent at how fast e-com can grow in the fourth quarter. It's not an unlimited pipe. So you have a lot to say about where e-com growth goes in the near term.
There's no question about it. I think you're right. The peaking factors, especially in the few weeks and during the Christmas time, is definitely the long pole in the tent. So here's where again the conversation needs to change to be more strategic. Why? Because now we operate 7 days a week. We are the only ones who are operating 7 days a week. So we have now increased capacity over the weekend. So then we have to work with our customers that operate on the weekends. So a lot of capacity you can inject into. We are building out these local last mile, facilities. So if we can get operations to inject into the last mile, then we can then get you to fast. So that we can go around our hubs, which are the ones that are constrained, especially in that period. Building a church for Easter is a tough thing to do. So we have to find creative ways, but I think we can do it. And I think that you're 100% right that the gating is the capacity during peak, but I think there's significant capacity we can add, especially if you work collaboratively, both operationally and technology side.
That's great. Jim, thank you so much for the questions. And we're going to wrap it there. I'm putting to all the panelists and attendees here the link to the Flying Eye Hospital. So please, everybody, check that out. If you need to ship something, FedEx.com, I believe, right? Yeah, there we go. And Raj, so great to see you.
You too.
We're going to be launching at CDX a new digital transformation weekly magazine focused on accelerating. And your post quickly on LinkedIn when you post day one of FedEx with the Chevy truck backed up to the Learjets, it was kind of an inspiration for me. So I'll be getting back to you on that.
Okay.
And Dan, so great to meet you and congratulations on your great work. We look forward to hearing more about the Flying Eye Hospital, and I'm going to wrap it there and send it over to Josh. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.